All right, let's jump right in with a similar question that we started the last panel with, which is really this idea of pilot to scale from the investor's seat. So, it's easier, it's not easy, but it's easier to get a pilot initiated than it is to scale in healthcare systems. And we heard a little bit about different models for how to scale. But from the investor side, from the capital side, what are the signals that tell you, even at a very early stage, that a company has a real path beyond their proof of concept? And then how can we as investors help them bridge that gap if we see a little bit of immaturity? And how much do you index on that? Each of you invest at different stages. So, how much do you index on this path to scale? So, Anshul, let's start with you.
Now, that's a great question. I think it all starts with, is the problem novel? Is it a big enough problem to solve? And is it their approach fundamentally solving the problem or just touching it at the edges? The second piece is around whether there were real value coming from the POC. Is it in soft dollars or hard dollars? And whether it's a scalable POC, we've just made it through a department and each department will be a battle going forward. So is it fundamentally a scalable approach to solving that problem, or is it just a one-off that you gotta repeat at every step of the way? And then the last bit that we look at is in terms of, is the customer willing to pay for this? How quickly are you actually converting them? How much is the belief that the customer has in your approach that they're saying, no, let's sign and actually pay you for this?
Daniel, how about you?
Yeah, so I think, healthcare systems are one part of the market. So I'll talk about that first, but then there's another part that I think is changing in a very interesting way. But in terms of healthcare systems, the way I see it is, to quickly shift from pilot to rollout, there are two things that I want to see. One is I firmly believe that it's really good to underpromise and overdeliver. So when companies have understood the way to underpromise and overdeliver during a pilot, then that's a pretty good sign because the likelihood of conversion is pretty high. The other thing is we want to see that the companies have developed this, feeling of who are the stakeholders and how to roll out, because the healthcare systems are very complex organizations. Now, the other segment that is becoming really interesting is the smaller organizations, because these organizations, they are much, of course, much smaller, much leaner, and what AI is doing is bringing automation opportunities, and these automation opportunities go beyond the IT budget of these smaller clinics, and what this means is that the ACVs are higher, but as the organizations are smaller, they are much faster to try out things. So what we see is that, while companies, of course, if applicable, right, but while companies spend some time with healthcare systems, they can in parallel move with the smaller organizations and things move much quicker. And then you see what happens in the full cycle. Can they sell? Can they deliver? Can they, retain? So yeah, these are the two angles that are important for us.
Yeah, I don't know how you do it. You're nonstop from this morning. So I don't know how you do it. Usually people only moderate 1 to 2 panels. I think historically, I've been involved with 550 companies, 220 in healthcare. And our first money in, 65% of the time, is seed round or Series A round. And, and many of them have actually grown to be quite sizable. And we've had 45 IPOs since COVID, 32 in healthcare. And so I think your question, it applies depending on what, because we've been investing in from therapeutics to device to diagnostic healthcare services to digital health, AI health, they all have different criteria. So, and depending on what they do, we will put in a different sort of criteria for them. And then also be working very closely with the entrepreneurs and the management team to make sure that they get over every single milestone one after another as sort of like a co-entrepreneur together. So yeah, but it's been very, very fun journeys all throughout.
Sam, how about you? What are your thoughts on how do you assess whether someone's got the team has the chops to take, or an idea that can really scale?
So similar to Nisa, we're investing at the seed and Series A, mostly at the seed, and more than half of the investments that Wing makes are in pre-revenue companies. So we would love to look at companies that have active POCs with revenue and try to understand if they can scale. More often than not, we're partnering even earlier than that. And so to Anshul's point, it's about, is this a company that's attacking a real felt need? Part of my role is staying in touch with the leaders of IT systems, of care practices, of the security leaders from these health systems, from payers, from everyone across the ecosystem, and having a pulse on where are the big untapped needs for new technology solutions. And if you're attacking a large enough problem, that more than anything is the best predictor of whether your small POC that you're able to find one key stakeholder for who is able to push it through actually has path to real production budget and can be a meaningful outcome. I'd say the other thing that's important for us, and as a firm that's very heavily focused on the data ecosystem, is whatever your technology or product is, making sure that that POC that's been scoped is something that accurately represents what a full-time production deployment would look like. And so this is maybe a little bit less true in healthcare, but is somewhat true. It's certainly true in the rest of our enterprise portfolio. A lot of the time a POC, again, will have just a single stakeholder who's able to run over a couple of the small hurdles that are supposed to be there for data governance or security or whatever. And you sort of fuss with a little bit of the conditions and say, hey, we got a POC going. And then, surprise, 6 months later, maybe there's been business results and you can demonstrate value, but you're gonna have to go back through the same gauntlet again if you wanna move to production. Doing it properly the first time and having a team that understands the importance of that process and why all those steps are there is absolutely essential if you're gonna be successful.
Yeah, so you also touched on something which is like, healthcare is unique, right? It's not like investing in other spaces, and we're lucky to have on the stage people who invest across a broad portfolio. So, one of the other things that I would love for you guys to touch on is, how do healthcare AI companies look different from enterprise or consumer or infrastructure AI companies? And what makes it an attractive investment class? What makes it hard? What are the blind spots that people who are generalist investors looking to make a play in healthcare AI, what should they be aware of there? And maybe Nisa, we'll start with you this time.
Well, it's funny because I think over the last 7-8 years, a lot of our consumer or tech colleagues have been advocating lots of different digital health companies and AI health companies, and the healthcare team would then ding all of them because they don't have any consideration for the regulatory side of things. And so, almost all, I would say 99% of the digital health and AI health companies are actually initiated by the healthcare teams. And we would engage our AI colleagues and, tech colleagues to look at the, AI infrastructure behind. But most of the time, it's pretty simple. So,
Daniel, what about you? You guys, I know 10VC invests across a wide portfolio. So when you think about healthcare and how it differs, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, and of course the market is very diverse, right? There are many different types of companies, and when I think of AI, I think mostly about automation. But automation could be applied to back office or managerial tasks, and then medical or scientific tasks. So the back office or managerial, that's much easier because that is very similar to B2B SaaS or even AI in other sectors. When you get to the to the medic part or the scientific one, you need experts, and there is regulation involved, and there is risk aversion, and so I think that the expectations on the medical and scientific side have to be modulated. If the companies focus on that part, if the companies focus on the administrative part, I think it is much closer to anything else that they're familiar with. Yeah.
Sam, what are your thoughts on that?
I think it is certainly a different category. I think one thing we specifically look for in healthcare companies, because of the higher burden of regulation and because of, even though it may be some of the same titles and at a high level some of the same workflows in the back office and the middle office, so much of it is particular to healthcare, and to have founders who have not come from that universe, there's an extraordinarily high bar to understand the work to be done. especially in an AI context where if you're trying to build agents, if you're trying to build automations, the person who has the best insight into that is someone who's been struggling with that problem so frequently. So many of the founders in our portfolio are people who are working in some sort of enterprise job and recognize that I just hate this one particular thing about my job, and it keeps them up at night so much that they have to start a company to fix it. And so, if you really need to understand how the healthcare system works. And as someone who does not spend their whole life in healthcare and someone who floats across the whole portfolio, with the exception of maybe the biotech corner, which is mostly PhDs and chemistry and other stuff, the healthcare world is the one that I have to focus the most energy on and take like a 30-minute context switch just to dive into that world, because everything is so different from how the rest of technology works. The other thing that we always keep in mind with healthcare investing as well is that if you're an enterprise, there's 100,000 businesses in America that might be customers for your product. If you're in consumer, there's 8 billion humans on Earth. Most of them have smartphones. They're all your TAM. In healthcare, depending on how you count, there's somewhere between 400 and 3,000 health systems in the US. It's a much smaller market, and you're constantly fighting for market share. And so everything about your story has to be about how you can elbow out what one of this very limited number of customers is already doing. And it's usually going to be a lot harder to land in that environment.
Yeah, so actually I think that's a great segue to Anshul, who started his career at Epic and then decided to go to Stanford to see what does it look like inside of a healthcare system, and then now, of course, is at Health Edge. So yeah, tell us a little bit about your journey, and then maybe build on some of these ideas about what makes healthcare unique, and also edging out some of the few. Epic is a great example of really.
That's a great question. I think when I was on the software side, you had a narrow view of what the world looks like, and almost every problem could be solved with software. And you're spending a lot of time with clinicians all the same, but you did not get a sense of everything else that was helping and handling in a health system altogether. So coming onto the other side was pretty eye-opening. It was to understand the cost pressures. It was to understand the operational complexity of running a hospital. And if you're looking at a complex ecosystem by itself, go check out a hospital near you and see how it actually operates, and how deep and how broad are the services that are provided in facilities, how every square inch is attributed, because it's one of the most expensive things that a health system builds in and usually invests with a 20 to 30-year return on investment. And how orchestrated a good service experience is out there from a patient's perspective, who's probably coming at the most vulnerable time for themselves and their families. So that was really eye-opening. The good example that I always remember is when we'd get an opportunity to be able to do transplants. So somebody passed away, they have organs that are available. It was a amazingly orchestrated framework where every OR would stop functioning so that these new organs could come in, and probably 20 to 30 kids could get a lease in life, which could last them anywhere from 10 to 30 years. And to be able to do those kind of things was extremely fulfilling. And at the same time, to see how you orchestrate that, how you get all of these teams together, on one side harvesting organs, on the other side putting the organs back in, was pretty amazing. So it's been a lot of fun in terms of understanding that journey, but that also tells you a sense of where the folks are coming from, what is more important from an overall human perspective, and last but not least, how you could play a role in terms of getting technology which could make a very complex ecosystem simplified or easier, or less cognitive burden to be able to do what they're there for, which is to make really sick people better.
That's great. And it's also a really good segue into trust, right? We've talked a lot about trust over the last 2 days. We heard the last panel talk about trust, not just in terms of the technical underpinnings of the technology, but also in terms of, do we trust that this is going to make a physician and a patient's life better? And then, of course, you inject in that a very messy reimbursement system that we have in the United States, and the fact that healthcare systems have to make money. So there's all of these incentives, and then and I think trust is really the fabric that kind of unifies them with the common aim of treating patients. But when you, and so there are many different lenses on trust, I guess is the take home there. And when you evaluate an investment, how do you personally define and weigh trust? And maybe even layer into that the trust that the people who have invested in your fund have in you to return on investment, and also the trust that you owe to the community in helping improve the lives of humans and the healthcare system. So Sam, would you like to kick us off there?
Sure. I guess the definition of trust is difficult. The weighting is high. That's the easier part of it. You know, when you sign up as an early stage investor, regardless of the category, you're signing on to partner with someone in building a company for at least 10 years. And so trust is inherent in all of the decisions that we make. I think in the healthcare universe, it's often obviously a more charged subject as people are dealing with their health and the welfare of their loved ones. And obviously there's a lot of frustration around the system and its difficulty to navigate for a lot of people. Our attitude is that so much of the value to be created is in finding efficiencies and is in cutting out unnecessary costs in a way that's beneficial to providers, to payers, and to patients. And so if you are operating in that space where you're trying to make the experience better for everyone with a company like Angle Health, which is a full stack provider for SMBs, it's a full stack carrier, you know, if you're making it easier to work with your payer, if you're making it easier for the employees to get you know, telemedicine or digital advice from physicians, and you're making the physician's life easier, you know, there's not some convoluted scheme to bill more codes or drain more money out of providers or bilk the payers out of more than what they've signed up for. There's so much, I'm not gonna say low-hanging fruit because it's not easy to find, but there are so many Pareto improvements possible through technology that as long as you're operating in that space, you don't have to spend as much time wondering who is trustworthy in this room or why am I being approached by this person.
Yeah, I love that. That's finding those shared wins that can be harvested across different stakeholders. Nisa, what about you? What are your thoughts on trust? What's your personal view on trust, and how does it weigh on investment decisions?
I love it. It's so broad that you can talk about anything. So, I mean, you know, I think having raised 17 funds, you know, trust with our LPs is very important, and continue to be able to deliver the DPI. But I think more importantly, I mean, we're in a healthcare panel. You know, from day one, I've been telling our colleagues that what we're investing in cannot let people die. I mean, you know, we cannot be investing in fake drugs. We cannot be investing in bad medical devices, fake clinical trial data. I mean, this is much more, our threshold is much higher than everything else in tech, because it goes into our body and it goes to our children's body, you know, and so forth. So that's why when we do due diligence, it's very deep dive. We want to make sure that we are indeed investing in very good technology and science and a very good team who are not cutting corners. So I think that trust is utmost for us, most important.
And the synthesis between that focus on good technology and good science and the long time horizon is that you will be found out. It is very difficult to make money as an investor investing in shams, and that simply doesn't pay out in the long term. And so if you know your LPs have trusted you with capital and you are doing your best to return money to them, it's in no one's best interest to invest in untrustworthy people.
Yeah, I love that. Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, integrity, of course, is the base, right? But putting that aside for a moment and just relating it to the categories that you listed, I think it's all about the entrepreneurs knowing their stakeholders really well. Because someone is going to prescribe whatever you have, someone is going to use whatever you have, and someone is going to pay for whatever you have, and sometimes it's the same person, sometimes it's different people. So the deeper you know their needs and what is important for them, the more successful you are to address those things, and then you generate the trust that you are mentioning. Now, we invest extremely early, so pre-seed. That means that most of these things are not shaped in many cases. So the way we evaluate that is when we talk to entrepreneurs, we want to understand how deep they know their customers, right? And if they mention all these things that they should be mentioning, because if they know their customers, they should be mentioning them, that's a great sign. And then what is the plan to address each of these topics, right? But the last thing is, if they miss mentioning something or if a plan sounds suboptimal, we also try to bring a perspective and we see how open to feedback the person is. Because then we know that even if the picture is incomplete, the person is wise enough to complete the picture and deliver whatever their stakeholders are going to value. So that's the way I would see the trust.
Yeah, I like that, the trust, but it's like a two-way conversation with the company you're investing in.
Yeah.
Anshul, what are your thoughts on trust?
I echo everything everybody else said. I think in high-risk, high-regulatory environments, trust becomes that much more important. It's easier to lose trust. And these are longitudinal plays. These are not short-term plays. So it's very easy to see past if their decisions are not good ones. So you have to play a longer play. You have to play it in a way that is safe, because ultimately it is somebody near you or you that is going to be using it. So there is a personal responsibility behind it as well.
Yeah. No, actually almost every healthcare company that I worked at, we have had something in our values that has been, to treat every sample, and I work in diagnostics, every sample that comes through our door as if it belonged to a family member. And I think, you're hearing some of this is it's, at the end of the day, it impacts all of us in a very, very real way. So that's very nice. So now I want to pivot a little bit to global lessons, because we have a couple people on the stage who have invested internationally and seen how wildly different healthcare systems and incentives are across, the US, Europe, Asia. And I know, I don't know if all of your funds invest internationally, but maybe you might want to speak to that, but also the global potential and the global reach, particularly when you think about something like AI, which, may be able to cross borders more easily. What insights and lessons do you have? And also, maybe what can you bring in from having observed how other healthcare systems work in terms of attacking some of the really pernicious problems that we have in the United States, while not also, throwing up your hands and saying, like, we have to change everything. So yeah, I would love to know, as a very wide-ranging question, again, Nisa, you can take it wherever you want to go, but AI, healthcare, and the international landscape, go.
Should I start? Yeah. Okay. I think I've invested extensively in Asia, in US, and Europe. I think what's really interesting is that now, more than ever, we could actually be leveraging in all the regions for different things, depending on what sector we're in. And then at the same time, AI together with healthcare also give us another advantage to actually build that out. I mean, a case in point is I was an early investor in a company called Schrödinger. And Schrödinger is a New York-based company, but they have a partnership with a San Diego company called Structure Therapeutics. But Structure is also based in Shanghai. So Structure was able to, Ray Stevens is actually a very successful serial entrepreneur, sold his company for $6.3 billion before, and he decided to set up this company and use Shanghai to do the early clinical development. Now, same thing for in silico medicine, which I was also early investor. They have office in Boston, in Shanghai, in Abu Dhabi, Europe. And it's really interesting to see how they leverage on all that. But, going forward right now, we're actually incubating a few really exciting AI global healthcare companies that I think would be very, very transformative. And I think a couple of the panels before talked about new business models. AI allows us to do that.
Daniel, how about you? I know you've thought a lot about Latin America and obviously seen.
I spent several years in Europe. What I would say is there are deep differences among regions, both in the size of the markets, the structure of the markets, and the culture of the people that interact in those markets. So what I'm going to say maybe is from a different angle, but I think you should use AI to reduce the friction when customizing whatever you are selling, right? Because For example, if you are manufacturing a drug, right, a pharmaceutical company, you need regulation approval everywhere, and there are different files, different types of data. You can use AI to just speed that thing up, and some other procedures. So I think maybe you can use AI yourself with your own operations to make the expansion much easier because you need to customize.
I love that. I love that. AI is a tool, but then also, cross-border, how do you leverage the strengths and challenges in different regions to really accelerate medicine and healthcare? Sam, to what extent does Wing VC invest internationally, and what's your kind of exposure or thoughts about the international market?
Our healthcare investing has been focused on the US, and so our international investments are more in the cybersecurity realm and a couple of other enterprise tools. So I will not try to speak out of turn for what the healthcare systems elsewhere look like.
All right. How about you, Anshul?
I think it's a good topic. I think it's always worthwhile to ask, even if the investment thesis in the US is, can that be extended and can that be expanded? And how hard or easy will it be to expand? How would other markets be able to absorb what you're building in a meaningful way? And then the secondary questions comes around, localization in terms of, whether that TAM is sustainable or not, or the fact that it just doesn't make sense in the context of the window. So if you're doing something on the insurance side, US insurance is very, very unique. I doubt you can use anything that you build there anywhere else in the world. But when you start looking at what's happening in India right now, they're taking the worst of the US insurance industry and building it out there as if it's the best thing in the world. So who knows, in 10 years' time, we could be using the same products in India, trying to do the same things that we have solved and solved poorly in the US.
All right. I'm not sure how to feel about India taking the worst of our insurance policies, but all right. We'll see how that goes. Maybe they will add a unique angle that will help us actually solve for some of the problems we have in the United States. Yeah. All right. So let's talk about, we've talked about the timescales involved and the sort of unique need for deep due diligence, but also the commitment over a longer period of time than you might get in sort of consumer tech or other sectors of the market. So let's talk about the long horizon of carrying capital. And if you zoom out to 2030, what is the single most important way that you hope that venture capital can shape AI in healthcare? Not just to generate returns, and I think that has come up again and again, is that this isn't something that we just do to make a quick buck, but also to fundamentally make care better. So I'm going to start with you, Anshul, on that one.
That's a tough question. There are a couple of themes. One of them is we have aging population, not just in the US, but also in UK, in Germany, in Japan. We have a secondary issue with all of these countries having very low fertility rates, which means we are producing less children. And so the population dynamics are changing. So there'll be more to take care of than those that are actually generating revenue and taxes and everything else to support that, which will then pressure our systems in terms of supporting an aging population, where we aren't increasing our physician counts or our nursing counts to actually catch up with it. So then everything that we got to think about doing from an AI perspective is how do we make sure that we can take care of a much broader population, which is going to live longer, by the way, with the same number of providers and the same number of caretakers, et cetera. And that's an interesting set of problems, whether there'll be more care from home, remote nursing, et cetera, because there won't be enough nursing rooms available to take care of it. So that's itself a unique set of challenges. I think there's a lot of ways AI can solve it and solve very specific portions of it. So I'm excited about that portion.
Daniel, what about you?
Yeah, I think that if you look at it from a supply and demand point of view, in terms of doctors mostly, or HCPs, I think that, there is supply now, not enough supply, and when the supply serves the demand, I think the quality is not that high in general. So what I would love to see is that the supply is much higher, but with higher quality, and that's going to be really impactful in people's lives, including the HCPs' lives. Yeah.
Quick one. So I think a case in point. I'm really interested. I've been always very interested in AI pathology. But the issue is that everything in the market is analog microscopes. So, essentially, I told the leading AI pathology companies, if you can come out with a digital microscope machine that's so affordable and you can roll it out very quickly, then we can actually apply AI pathology. So 2 years later, a company did that. I immediately invested in, and now they have the largest data set. I think they've done like 20 million patients. And every week we're saving lives because the AI pathology is able to detect patients that otherwise they couldn't.
I think one of the themes that we're most excited about over the long term in healthcare technology, and the one that sits at the nexus of data, AI, and health, which is where we think about operating, is what we call continuous diagnosis, continuous intervention. So sort of turning on its head the CI/CD framework from software development is what is the CDCI pathway forward? And so whether that's a combination of wearables, whether it's more frequent check-ins with digital physicians or digital assistants to practitioners, how do we continue to always collect more data about the welfare of the patient population? That's the sort of continuous data stream that we can then use to design better care, to develop, custom pharmaceuticals when needed, and to really solve for exactly what was highlighted of the massive supply-demand imbalance that we have of carers and just general working age population versus the people who are going to need a lot of medical care in 2030 and beyond.
Oh, and I guess that was an amazing way to end because our time is up, and I know that everyone's probably hungry for lunch. So please join me in thanking our panelists for what was an extremely engaging and enjoyable conversation.